Good morning, Redeemer. Welcome to the Daily Word. We are finishing up the week looking at 2 Corinthians chapter 10. And what a week it's been, looking at generosity and giving, looking at how we're to operate in the world but not being of the world and being yoked with unbelievers, looking at what true repentance is and what godly sorrow leads to. And here and now in chapter 10, we are going to look at spiritual warfare as sort of the focal point of this entire chapter. There are those around Corinth who are assaulting Paul's character in the context here. False apostles, which in chapter 11 you're going to get to dig into, who are undermining his ministry and his credibility. We could also surmise that there are those at Corinth that are still a little wary of Paul's boldness or his rebuke of them. Of course, we know from earlier chapters that their response, many of them, was very godly, very sorrowful, true repentance. But undoubtedly, there are many scholars who believe there are still people in Corinth at the church that are very suspect of Paul. He's a little too strong, a little too intense. Perhaps they're weak believers or new believers or those who aren't even true believers. And the false teachers are having a heyday with them. Really easy targets for false apostles who are on the assault and seeking to discredit Paul. And so let's read through the chapter together, and then I want to stop and spend a little time on the spiritual warfare section and really clarify a few things for us. I, Paul, he says, myself entreat you by the meekness and gentleness of Christ. I who am humble when face to face with you, but bold when I'm away. That's referring to the way he wrote to them when he wasn't there. I beg of you that when I'm present, I may not have to show boldness with such confidence as I count on showing against some who suspect us of walking according to the flesh. For though we walk in the flesh, we are not waging war according to the flesh. Notice in verse 2, I beg of you that when I'm present, I may not have to show boldness with such confidence as I count on showing against some. Paul is going to bring it when it comes to people who are falsely accusing him of hypocrisy. He's going to bring it when it comes to false teachers and those who would undermine church leaders who are faithful. He doesn't want to be that way with the faithful. He wants to be gentle and meek. And so he says that to set the stage. And then in verse 4, really begins to help us now understand spiritual warfare. For the weapons of our warfare are not of the flesh, but have divine power to destroy strongholds. So there clearly is this idea of, in the heavenlies, spiritual war and strongholds, demonic agents, demonic authorities, demonic principalities seeking to hold in bondage people or territories or certainly false converts who are in the church. We destroy arguments and every lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of God, and take every thought captive to obey Christ. Oh, look at the Christian response to that. We destroy arguments. So we don't battle by shouting out loud. We don't battle by hitting or punching or attacking with sword. We destroy arguments and every lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of God, and take every thought captive to obey Christ. So my thought life, my mind, is the battleground for spiritual warfare. The mind of somebody else is the battleground for spiritual warfare. So I'm looking to change minds when I'm looking at spiritual warfare. Being ready to punish every disobedience when your obedience is complete. Look at what is before your eyes. If anyone is confident that he is Christ, let him remind himself that just as he is Christ, so are we. So now we're back to Paul explaining, hey, we're on the same playing field here. We are Christ's. He's commending and unfortunately defending his ministry, which Paul rarely does. He doesn't worry about what everybody's saying and the critics. He's really after the church, wants to love the church. But in this chapter, he needs to make it clear warfare is coming through an assault on their minds. They need to take thoughts captive. That's what we do as Christians. And he says, even if I boast a little too much of our authority, which the Lord gave for building you up and not destroying you, I won't be ashamed. So now he's saying, hey, if I appear to be talking a little too much about who I am and what the Lord has given me to do for you, I'm not ashamed. I am going to make it clear. I know my authority. I know who my authority is. I know who has anointed me and called me and gifted me to do this. And then I know my motivation. It's you. It's building up you. It's serving you. It's loving you. It's for you. I don't want anything from you. I just want something for you. That's really what Paul's getting at. I do not want to appear to be frightening you with my letters. Verse 9. For they say his letters are weighty and strong, but his bodily presence is weak and his speech of no account. There is the evidence right there of what people were saying about Paul. As I mentioned earlier, they're undermining or they're a little wary of him, or some people have opinions about him, or there's critics or false teachers. They're saying, oh yeah, Paul's a real hot shot, real tough guy in his writing, but his bodily presence is weak. Historically, Paul was said to be short, bald, and have a hooked nose. Literally, not much to look at. Very weak present in bodily presence, but very bold in his writing. And I think of Paul when I read his letters like a giant because of the way he writes. But there were those that said, he's just a short, balding, hook-nosed guy. He ain't got nothing. And that is what they said about him. He's weak. His speech is of no account. Let such a person understand that what we say by letter when absent, we do when present. Paul's saying, hey, we back up what we teach and preach in person and through a letter. Not that we dare to classify or compare ourselves with some of those who are commending themselves, but when they measure themselves by one another and compare themselves with one another, they're without understanding. But we will not boast beyond limits, but will boast only with regard to the area of influence God assigned to us to reach even you. Isn't that beautiful? I'm not going to boast beyond my limits, Paul says. Only with regard to what I'm sure God has given me to influence. He's given me the power to do. It'd be like a mother. Right now, maybe you're watching, you're a mom, and you can accurately boast and say, you know what, this is my house, my children, and I am their mother, and I am going to lead them and pour into them. I am in charge here. They're mine. You be confident because you're their mom. You know your role, you know your calling, you know your gifting, you know your strength, and you know your purpose. Paul's the same way when it comes to his church leadership. He's going, I'm sorry, I'm not sorry. I'm not going anywhere. And I'm not ashamed of what I'm called to do or my strength in the Lord to serve you. For we are not overextending ourselves as though we did not reach you, for we were the first to come all the way to you with the gospel of Christ. We do not boast beyond limit in the labors of others, but our hope is that as your faith increases, our area of influence among you may be greatly enlarged, so that we may preach the gospel in lands beyond you without boasting of work already done in another's area of influence. Let the one who boasts, boast in the Lord. For it is not the one who commends himself who is approved, but the one whom the Lord commends. What a great model for us in ministry and in life, to boast in the Lord, to know that he has called us to do certain things, gifted us to do certain things, to know that our influence, our reach, our gifts, abilities, talents, and opportunities are all for the use of the Lord, for his mission and his purpose on earth, for his glory, and for others. And so the call here, or maybe an application, would be, let's you and I get our eyes off ourselves today. Let's you and I not commend ourselves to elevate ourselves, but let's be sure and confident of who we are so that we can walk sure and confident in what God has called us to do. My prayer for you is as you head into the weekend, your worship is enriched, even enlarged. Your heart is filled with joy and praise for God and his glory, because he's given you strength through his word as you feast on it this week. Praying for you as you dig into chapter 11, beginning on Monday morning. Love you, church.